Real YouTubers, play Among Us. I am here to help you win. Hello, what's going on? Today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about the game Among Us, which is a popular social deduction kind of game that popped up relatively recently. Has kind of taken over a lot of the online spaces on Twitch, on YouTube, etc., etc. Now, if you're anything like me, you've played this game. I normally, when I play this game, I'm not playing necessarily to win so much as I'm playing to have fun and just to, goof around with my friends and make sure everyone has a good time. However, on the other hand, I am a, former world champion, a current national champion, and I do like to kind of think about games in an objective sense, trying to solve them, trying to come up with strategies to do well. I think it's a very interesting task. So, when I'm not playing with friends, oftentimes I'll play the game just in random lobbies online, and through this, I've discovered some things that have worked relatively well for me that typically help me secure victory, or at least contribute to the team's victory. I have like an absurdly high win rate online, and I'm not sure if it's just that everyone else is bad, or I don't really know, but I've been doing quite well when I'm playing in random lobbies. So I figured, hey, here's some tips that I've kind of noticed and things that I tend to do. Why don't I share them with you all? So, this is from the Crewmate point of view as well. If you want to see another one of these where I talk about imposter and how you win as imposter, that's another, that could be a totally different video. But for now, we're just going to talk about crew. So I have 7 tips for how to consistently win Among Us as the crew. Number 1, keep in mind who is and isn't clear. Now, this is going to change depending on the rules you're playing with. In Among Us, you have the ability to turn off visual tasks, visual confirms. So, for example, someone who is a crew member, if they do a task and you see a task that has a visual animation, you know that person cannot be an imposter because imposters do not have tasks. However, sometimes people will play with these animations off, so this is a bit more difficult. I would say that pretty much the only other way to do it is, as the game progresses, you might have a hunch for who is and who isn't. Like, for example, if there are 2 kills and you're with somebody the whole round, then you know that that person couldn't have killed anybody most of the time, unless there was time for like 2 kills from one person. That's one way to clear people. Another way to clear people is you can pay attention when the voting happens. So if someone says, hey, I saw blue kill somebody, and you vote blue out and they were an imposter, it's almost certain that the person who accused them is not going to be the imposter. Of course, it's possible, but I think in that case, it's pretty much safe. So just remembering who is and isn't clear is a very valuable skill, because if you know who is clear and you stick with them, you're very unlikely to get killed. Especially when there's only one imposter left, you're pretty much, guaranteed to not get killed. Number 2. Avoid vulnerable spots. On each map, there are areas that are safe and there are areas that are less safe. I guess nowhere is really safe if you want to be objective, but there are certain areas that really leave you vulnerable to getting killed. The way that I think about these is primarily rooms where you can walk into and walk out, especially rooms that have a vent, where there isn't good visibility from the outside. So, I believe the map is Polis, the main, kind of the default map, rooms like Medbay are extremely, extremely dangerous because there's only one way into the room, there's no other exit out of the room, and there's a long hallway and a vent at the end of the long hallway, so it is a very dangerous spot. Of course, sometimes you have to go into these rooms to do tasks. We'll talk about tasks later, but yeah, in general, like, trying to avoid these spaces or only going in when there's a bunch of other people is a good tip. Something that somebody else told me is that in the early game, you could try and go to these vulnerable spots when a sabotage is called. If a sabotage is called on the opposite side of the map and there's enough people left that you feel confident that the sabotage that the other crew members will take care of it, that is a good time to do these vulnerable tasks that you have to do. But you pretty much shouldn't be going into certain rooms except to check if someone is dead in there, aka peeking in and then just leaving, unless you really need to or you feel pretty safe. Number 3. Pay attention when sabotages are called and to the specific sabotage that is called. The thing about sabotages is that imposters have to wait before they can call them after they've called them once. So for that reason, they're typically going to try and use them when there's a purpose to them. So if lights are going off, that probably means they want to kill somebody nearby, or it typically means they want to restrict visibility for one reason or another. Whether it's, maybe it's to get away from a body, maybe it's to limit visibility or draw everyone towards lights. There are lots of different reasons for it, but normally they're not called for no reason, especially in the early game. Typically when I think about sabotages, the thing that I pay attention is where does the sabotage force people to go? And when you know that, you can guess, okay, maybe they're trying to send people away from another location. So if sabotage is called on the right side of the map, I'll typically go look at the left side of the map to see if anyone is dead, and vice versa. If sabotage is called on the left side of the map, I'll go to the right side of the map to check. This is really only good in the early game when you feel confident that the sabotage will get done, but it's also good to know like in the late game, because if you feel like, oh, there's not enough people left that I can feel confident that the other people will take care of this, you still know where to look first after a sabotage is called. So it's very important to kind of realize what is the sabotage causing, and why would an imposter want us all to go to electrical, for example, or something like that. Number 4, cameras are your friend. I really like cameras. When I play this game, I really, really like cameras. You have to be careful though. The way the cameras works is it gives you 4 fields of vision into different places on the ship, at least in the map that I'm most familiar with. And other maps they work differently, but they allow you basically to see different locations on the ship while not actually being in those locations. The other thing about cameras is that when you're in cameras, a red light will flash, indicating that someone is watching. So an experienced imposter may not kill in front of cameras, but even if they don't kill, it's very good to see who is with who. That's what I really like cameras for. Sometimes people will kill on them and then you just get a free imposter confirm, but oftentimes it's just good to see, okay, like, I saw 2 people go into medbay and I saw 1 person leave medbay. Let's go check out medbay, for example. Let's make sure no one's dead in medbay. And, sometimes it's like, okay, red is with yellow. So if yellow dies shortly after that, you can say, okay, well, I know for a fact red was with them. So it's just good because they give you a lot of different information. You have to be really careful with cameras because cameras are typically in a location that's very vulnerable. Keeping in mind what we were talking about earlier with the vulnerable spots. And basically, you definitely don't want to get caught in them. So typically, I think the most optimal way to do cameras is keep an eye on them, but don't stay there too long. Just continually peek in, peek out, like see a couple people and then leave. Because, like I mentioned earlier, there is a red flashing light that comes on when someone is watching cameras. So if you're an imposter, you see the light, you know, hey, there's someone in a vulnerable spot, and I know where that vulnerable spot is, and there's a vent in that room. So you do have to be really careful not to get caught there for too long, but it is nice just to peek in, peek out sometimes. Number 5, sometimes being killed is optimal. Now, this might sound counterintuitive, but the goal of Among Us is to win as a team. And in order to do that, sometimes you might be able to bait people into killing you and inadvertently revealing themselves. So one example of this is, let's say there's 5 people left, 1 imposter, and the other 3 people are together. If you stick with the other person and they turn out to be imposter and kill you, the other 3 people know by default that it wasn't any of them because they were all together, and therefore, therefore they know who the last person was. Another way to do this is I really like to when I see someone is on cameras, I like to kind of run between the different camera locations and stay there, especially if someone is nearby, because if they don't notice that the cameras are on, and they just kill me, then someone will have seen it. Can report it from there. So that's pretty good. Of course, the other imposter could be watching cameras, but most of the time, an imposter isn't going to want to watch the cameras because they don't need to see anyone kill anybody else because they already know who the killers are. So, basically, keeping in mind that sometimes, it's not always the worst thing to die. The other thing is about tasks. So I guess this will lead into our next point, which is number 6. Don't focus so much on the tasks in the early game. This is something that I personally do. I don't know how other people like to play it, but personally, the way that I think about it is it doesn't matter too much if you finish your tasks right away or if you finish them in the later parts of the game, as long as they get done, as long as you're basically not the person holding everybody else back. So in the early game, I typically like to run around, try and gather information, try and get hunches on who maybe the killers are, who's sticking with who, stuff like that. And I really don't do my tasks until mid to late game. This is the way that I like to play. It obviously doesn't work if everyone does it because you don't want to be holding everybody else up. But the thing is that once you've been killed, it's very, very, very easy to finish your tasks. And so I typically like to try and kind of keep an eye on people, try and get at least 1 imposter. And then, if at that point, if I'm the one starting to hold people up, I can just do my tasks recklessly without worrying about safety. And then if I die, I'll just be faster at doing my tasks. So I think it's oftentimes better in the early game to try and get a read on who could be bad and trying to catch people in the act of being sneaky rather than hyper-focusing tasks and getting them done right away. That's just the way that I like to play. Maybe it's not actually optimal, but it's been working for me. So yeah, that also ties in with our previous point, which is that if you have a lot of tasks yet left, you kind of want to get killed because then you could do them so much faster because you're able to float through walls, and you can't be, so you don't have to worry about sabotages, so yeah. And our last and final tip of the day is to pay attention to voting at number 7. So this is obviously better depending on with certain rules rather than others. Specifically, it's better when imposter confirm is on, aka some people play with imposter confirm off, meaning after you eject somebody from the ship, it doesn't say whether or not they were imposter. But in general, it's good to see who's voting together. But there's more to voting than just that. Voting is one of the objective pieces of information that everybody has access to. It's not like he said, she said, which is part of the game. You're able to see how everyone else voted. So things to note are if someone accuses someone quickly, seeing who jumps on that right away. Oftentimes imposters won't want to be the first people to accuse, but they want to get people off of the ship that aren't imposters. So typically people who are quick to follow up and accuse or jump on a bandwagon to getting other people killed, people to keep an eye on. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's good to be wary of these people. Additionally, people who are defending each other, in general, when you're playing with 2 imposters, it typically be you might say, oh, I was with blue, blue couldn't have been it, I was with them. But if they're both imposters, then they could just lie and cover each other. Though it is risky for the imposters. So, yeah. But yeah, basically just paying attention to voting, seeing how people vote, and then this is if someone is ejected and you learn that they were or were not the imposter, paying attention to who voted for them, who didn't vote for them, that kind of thing. It's a small thing and it's not going to help you in every game, but if you're able to gather information from it, I think it can definitely pay off in the long run. That's all of my tips. I do want to say that none of these tips are read dependent on the people you're playing with. Like I mentioned, I gathered these tips from playing primarily with people I didn't know, and so in general, each game is going to be different depending on who you're playing with, and especially when you're playing with people you know. Maybe you're the kind of person who likes to make reads based on quirks or based on tells that people are displaying, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I tried to give tips that are pretty objective and will come into play regardless of whether you know the people you're playing with or you don't. Because even if you know everyone you're playing with, the stuff should still help you stay alive and potentially catch other imposters as well while you're playing. But of course, if you want to play more read-dependent gameplay, totally fine, nothing wrong with that. It's just that it's a lot harder to give tips for that because everyone acts differently, and it's more dependent on how well you trust your instincts, how well you trust your ability to read the people you're with, and how well you understand how people act when they're imposter versus crew. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If you like this video, please let me know. Obviously, this is very different than my normal content, so, yeah, it's definitely experimentation for me. But if you want to see more Among Us content, let me know. And if you'd like to see one of these where I talk about how to win as the imposter, also let me know. It's very different strategies that you employ. So, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.